some, I guess, straightforward questions in terms of talking about the roles that you had in the field and the locations, and perhaps a little bit about how long you were there for and the project structure itself. So,
should I go first?
Go for it, mate.
Okay, I went to Swaziland for 6 months. Okay. Swaziland's now called Eswatini, and I went as a finance manager. I was there for 6 months, based in the south of the country. It's very, very poor country, and we treated patients with HIV, TB, and just before leaving, we were looking at treating patients with cervical cancer. So an area with very big need, and about 200 staff in the project across the two projects, and reporting back to coordination, which was based in the capital, Babani.
And Kerry, how about you?
Yeah, I've done 2 missions. My first mission was in Nigeria, in the south of Nigeria, in a city called Port Harcourt. And MSF runs now 2 sexual violence clinics there. The team isn't massive. Maybe it was a team of 8 expat staff and about 60 local staff when I was there. Yeah, I was there for 6 months, which is a pretty typical first mission length.
And so in terms of the role that you were there for, did you have a finance role only, or a finance HR, or what was the makeup of your job?
Yeah, I was the finance HR manager. Yeah, so sometimes it might be like Nick was finance manager alone, I was finance HR, and then again I was finance HR manager in Libya as well. Yeah, so that way you're the focal point in the project team for all people and money matters.
And so often, from a recruitment perspective, people are quite surprised that we have opportunities for HR and finance professionals, as well as medical profiles. If you were going to talk about, I guess, some of the key skills, perhaps, that you found useful from a finance or HR perspective that you think someone that's interested in applying should build up on or focus on, what advice would you give them from that side of things?
I'd say from a finance point of view, as a finance manager, you're not hands-on entering invoices, that sort of thing. I mean, you really are there in a managerial capacity, so you're really keeping an eye on the budget. You're making sure that all spend is according to budget, any expenditure at all. That budget, the knowledge of budgets, how to manage them, how to forecast, I would say is really quite important.
Okay. And Kerry, I guess from a HR side, what skills do you think would be beneficial for someone in HR looking to work with MSF?
For HR, I guess a strong sense of structure. So understanding like those fundamental levels that you're aiming to achieve around meeting the local industrial relations requirements, which you'll have a lot of support with, but just understanding how you need to learn those and enact those, and just really keeping an eye on the soft skills as well. So there's a lot of very structured things, and then there's also the fact that people will look to you for people leadership in other ways as well. And if I could just also add, I think Nick, you just said something about maybe not being hands-on with the invoices, but in my particular roles I was very hands-on with signing a lot of invoices and also just making sure those invoices were of the right quality and things like that. So
that's very true. I'll actually agree with that entirely. So you're not physically entering them into a system, you're not a data entry clerk, but it absolutely
a lot of signatures required.
It absolutely is your role to make sure that they're compliant and they're within MSF standards and the standards, SPARSI standards as well for tax rules, etc. So you're quite right, Kerry.
And so sort of what would you talk about in terms of where HR and finance fits in terms of the project structure and the makeup of a typical sort of project structure? Where does HR and finance fit into it?
Well, we often have a pretty standard structure, although the nature of the projects change wherever you are. So there'll always be a project coordinator, which is the team leader, and then people covering off the main professional areas in the team. So finance and HR, there'll be a medical team leader. There might be other medical professional staff as well, and a logistics manager too. So the logistics and finance and HR are the most obvious non-medical support, as well as the project coordinator, the team leader, who may or may not be medical, and then there'll be other medical staff staff like medical team leader, maybe mental health manager, maybe a hospital manager, depending on the project.
Okay. And would you say that finance and HR, are they normally based in the field projects themselves or in the capital you mentioned before?
Yeah.
What's the sort of location of where you worked?
In the projects I worked in, everyone was based in the field. The coordination team were based in the capital.
Okay.
But our HR staff were all based in Llangano in the south of the country where I worked. So as I said, there were about 200 staff across the two projects. So there were 2 HR managers. And they would look after the recruitment for all of the staff we needed across the projects. So that was people, there'd be medical staff, non-medical, as Kerry mentioned, there'd be logisticians, admin staff, finance staff, the whole gamut really. So if you think of any hospital like clinic or project, if you look at it from that perspective, all of those roles are required to keep that project going, and it's exactly the same in the field. So those HR staff were with us in the field basically.
And so Kerry, perhaps from a HR perspective, what would you say a typical sort of focus on HR activity would you be doing in the field, from a recruitment side, or is it industrial relations? What type of HR work were you doing?
Yeah, quite a real range.
Okay.
And it could be a bit of a challenge to just set the priorities. You might have hiring in one part of the project, and there might be a lot of pressure on that recruitment process, and at the same time you might have a disciplinary issue but you need to follow the local country guidelines for that, and maybe that's more delicate. So you'll have a lot of these things rushing at you, lots of hiring and firing and providing people management skills to your other managers who, when they're running their teams as well. So a lot of those sort of structural things, and also some of the softer skills things as well.
I mean, I find it, it's that even though you might be working in quite difficult conditions and under difficult circumstances, you're still dealing with people from a HR side. So you've still got the same people issues that you might have, back at home.
Definitely.
Just in perhaps a more complex environment that you've got to operate in.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, having stress management techniques, I think, is a really important part of everybody going to the field, and especially the HR manager. You've got to keep your cool in some difficult situations, perhaps, and people will look to you for that.
And I'd say it's much the same in the finance role as well. It can be quite frustrating at times when, someone comes to you and they need money for something which in their eyes is very important, and you can see the value of that in the project. But, there are very strict protocols that you have to adhere to with regards to expenditure. You can't really go outside of the structures that are in place. So being able to cope with those situations and being able to explain to people why they can't have what they want right now can sometimes be challenging.
So good communication skills are
absolutely, they're essential.
That's right.
And just one other thing I want to touch on is talking about working in a low resource environment. It's something we put our essential criteria that people need to be able to be comfortable, have experience working in low resource environments. From a HR and finance perspective, how did that apply to both of you in terms of, I guess, limited technical resources available or more manual processes? What was your experience?
Well, I'd say one of the things that used to kill me every month end was there'd be a storm, and you can't control the weather, obviously, so the electricity would go down, you'd have no internet, you'd have no phone, you'd have coordination wanting your end of month finances, and it was unbelievable. It happened every single month end, so there was always this struggle to get work done and to be as prepared as you can, to have your finances ready on time, but there were always problems.
The deadline?
Generally we did. I had fantastic staff that I worked with. We worked hard together to do it. You'd preempt as much as you could. You think it's going to go down any minute now, but that was every single month. That was a problem, and it's just part and parcel of living in that part of the world, really. So.
I've just got a comment about that. Technology, yeah. So I've worked with the French office and also the Dutch office, and so the French have a bit of a joke with their software. So they have 2 custom-built softwares to help. Okay. They have Saga, the finance one, which is just a saga and not a joke. It's seriously, but and also Omer, which is the HR software. And each of these are quite cleverly designed for low technology environments. Okay. In that they work offline and you can email updates to each other, which are small files and things like that. So there are kind of ways to get around it. And then I also worked with the Dutch office, and they have a different software called Unifield, which is actually online but has ways of working well offline. Okay. So I guess we've kind of adapted our ways of working around information exchange and which software and how to those low-tech environments. Okay. Yeah.
We also used Unifield in the project I worked with, and one of the great things, before I went to the field, there was some online training available with Unifield. So I don't know if you did that as well. So so I had some kind of understanding of the budget structures that I'd be working with before arriving there, so it wasn't all entirely new. Yeah. In coordination, I was given a great briefing on how it all worked, but my staff in the 2 projects were pretty amazing, and they helped a lot. But,
and so from, I guess, another area to touch on is about policies and procedures and, from an organisational perspective. From a HR and finance perspective, what policies and procedures were there in place? Were there any policies and procedures in the projects? Perhaps you just touch it. So a lot of people, wouldn't quite understand or know how projects would be set up. So from a procedural perspective.
Okay, well I went away with the Swiss MSF. So Geneva is where our project that was run by. So Geneva. So coordination would report to Geneva, and from where we were in the field, we would report to coordination. So there were 3 different levels, and they're very, very strict, the guidelines that you have to work in. As I say, for any expenditure to happen, there's got to be 3 sets of eyes. Nothing gets paid without having gone through the right process. Your store orders through your logisticians. Everything is around process, and it's very very difficult to work outside of that. So those structures are in place. They're very, very useful because everybody knows what their responsibilities and guidelines are, and you absolutely know if you're working outside of them, and that can be really, really beneficial as well because you have the backup of that structure to explain the reasons why you can or can't do what you're doing within your position.
Is there anything you want to add to that?
Yes, I was just thinking about I was evacuated on one of my projects, and it was that's an important time to have an evacuation plan. So even in that instance, we had a plan of how we might manage our cash and our human resources files and stuff like that. When I went with the French office, they had done an enormous amount of work to standardise how we do the financial practices in the field, and they had training around it's called the basics. So these is the basic standards we expected, and we had a 5-day training before going to the field where they instilled in us exactly these basics around safe management, around cash management, around lots of things. So that was very helpful. And then in the field itself, there will always be the HR guidelines, or this document might be called something different in different missions, but this is going to be a very important document which translates the local employment law into the guidelines for your staff. So often we would return to particular parts of this document to translate what does this actually mean for our staff, and these are the points you might work on with the HR coordinator in the capital. But it was all really very structured.
And I guess just before we go on to perhaps some Q&A questions, something else I often get asked during the recruitment process is around the supports that you have available to you, and in terms of reporting structures, did you have direct reports, and who did you report to? Where did you get your support from whilst in the field?
For me, my first line of command was the project coordinator. So I had two project coordinators because it was two projects. So they know the projects inside and out. Fortunately, the ones that I'd worked with have been there for quite some time. So if ever I had any queries at all, they'd be my first port of call. Yeah. Their knowledge base was fantastic and a huge resource. From a financial point of view, it would be in coordination.
Okay.
So it would be the finance coordinator. If I had any issues on a financial basis or anything like that, then it would be him that I would go to. Okay. So there is always that support structure there, absolutely.
Yeah.
And same for you, would you say, in terms of reporting structures?
Yes, sorry.
Support?
I would say, like the local teams that will be helping you are, completely indispensable. So I was very lucky to arrive to someone who'd been quite well trained on my first mission. There was a finance officer who helped actually with finance and HR, and there was another admin support person as well. And then I've also been in projects where maybe it's a bit harder if the team isn't as competent. Yeah. So I guess maybe you'll get a bit of a range in terms of the staff in place to support you, and then up the chain, to the coordination staff in the capitals. Yeah, again, that's they're very much there to support the projects and help the projects succeed.
And just talking about the national staff, I mean, that's such a valuable resource. It's something we talk about a lot, that but they're there every day, and they know, and you can learn so much from them. So it's really important to sort of take that on board as well. So
exactly. There's no point turning up and just reinventing the wheel. There's been none of that.
Yeah. So we'll just jump now. I guess a couple of questions from the Q&A. So in terms of, what was your background prior to working for MSF in terms of career-wise? What were you doing before you went to the field?
I worked, my background's always been in finance, or for the past 20 years or so it's been in finance. I worked for a long time for a small fine art printing company. It was quite a big company actually. I worked with them for many years, 12 or 13 years, and so that's where I got my finance training, really, if you like. And then before working for MSF, I worked for a smaller not-for-profit where we ran clinical trials, again as a finance manager. Okay. And then I was fortunate enough to take a short contract within the MSF Sydney office as finance officer here for a couple of months, and that was my introduction to Médecins Sans Frontières, and doors opened. So.
Okay, how about you? What's your background?
I did start off in the environment movement some years ago, and I could never really get a job. There weren't very many. So I decided to work in not-for-profit organisations doing financial management. Right, okay. Yeah, because I figured there would always be a job. So I went back to uni and got an accounting degree, and I've since worked around local NGOs in Australia and also Oxfam, and also the Sydney office here for Médecins Sans Frontières. So I guess by the time I decided to go to the field with MSF, I'd worked in financial management roles for some time, and also done a lot of humanitarian studies and other things on the side as well. So that was my background.
Great. Okay, so just looking at the questions coming through. So can I choose the context of where I go? Can I choose where I'd like to go? What would you both say to that? What's your experience?
Well, I was given two options before going. I was given Swaziland or Iraq, and really it took a bit of negotiation with my partner. I'm in a very long-term relationship, so going to the field was something that I really wanted to do, and I had to negotiate that. So Swaziland was shorter than the mission in Iraq. The mission in Iraq would have been incredibly interesting, but so I chose Swaziland.
Well, when I joined the field process, it was I was given the option to nominate countries that I did not want to be offered. So I didn't choose any. I was open to all the countries.
That's a great approach.
And I just was like, let's get this show moving. So I guess I was familiar enough with the risk management processes within MSF and how it kind of works in the field around security management that I felt safe to put my name to whichever came up. Generally, I was given the impression that it's a good idea to accept what comes up when it comes up, because it can be quite a slow and long process, and you might as well just give it a crack.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I'd agree with that. I mean, I think you can say no and no and no and no, and suddenly you'll be surprised if you're not being asked again.
I mean, I guess just to add to that from a recruiter perspective is, you can say no, and you're not required to say yes to everything, but there is that expectation that you're willing to go to perhaps unstable contexts, because that's mostly about MSF work. So it is definitely, if you're thinking about applying something, to consider the locations, because it does impact the ability for us to find a suitable placement for you. So.
Yeah.
Great. Just looking at other questions. So got a couple of minutes left. So what should I take with me to the field? What was your must-have item to the field, or packing?
Oh, pink teddy. I guess
Mine was blue.
I did a lot of research. I asked around a lot of people and really considered where I was going. So I took a very lightweight gym mat, and also I had figured out an app to do a workout. So and maybe some yoga videos, getting more complicated, but maybe that happened once a week or something. But I guess it's like something you could do for exercise, or a little plan around how to keep fit in a place where you may not have many options. And also a Kindle.
Yeah, great idea.
Weirdly, this may sound weird, eucalyptus spray.
Okay,
because I knew I'd missed the Aussie bush. So also it's a really good antiseptic for insect bites.
Yeah.
So
it's a win-win.
Yeah, so that's really why I took it, just saying, but yeah.
I agree. My Kindle was probably my best friend.
Yeah.
But MSF did supply us with some resources for sort of relaxation and things like that before leaving. I don't think I've really looked at them. Fortunately, the environment I was in was very secure. So, there was a local aerobics class that we could go to, which I went to a few times, but I'm really uncoordinated. And I was put to the back of the room, so that didn't last for too long. But I don't know. It's a difficult question, really. I'd say my Kindle and my phone were really important. My phone, obviously.
I think Kindle comes up a lot.
Just
you may
keeping in contact.
You may not be able to stream, for example, in these low technology places. So other ways to keep yourself occupied.
So just another question. So how much scope is there for recent graduates gaining in the field roles without those extensive finance backgrounds that you both have? So I guess I would touch on this a little bit from a recruitment perspective. Is we do have a minimum criteria for all our positions, and it's usually roughly around a minimum of 2 to 3 years of relevant experience, especially from a finance perspective. And the reason for that is to obviously ensure that you can function independently in your role. You're not coming as a new grad into the field, so we do have an expectation of minimum requirements, but perhaps the two of you can talk about as a graduate, what steps, if a graduate came to you looking for advice, would you say for them to go and do to build up their career profile? Do you have any suggestions?
I think really it's got to be hands-on experience within a finance role.
Yeah.
And to gain hands-on experience of, like I mentioned before, managing a budget was really important. Managing people is really important. So anything that you can do to build up those skills is essential, really. For as part of
it's much more practical skills, rather than like strategic sort of
really,
planning. It's much more sort of tactical than.
Or it might be both. Or you can bring a lot to the table. But even volunteering is a possible way of getting experience if you in those early years.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Do some pro bono work as well.
Yeah, that's right. Or be a
volunteering.
treasurer of an association or a sporting club or something where you've actually got to do the grunt work, and also play a role in explaining to people how the finances make it all work, and no money, no show, that type of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right. So just looking at the questions. So how do I apply to join the organisation? So there's great information, again, I've mentioned on our website already. So I'd recommend anyone that is interested in applying to go to our website. You'll find the profile criteria for every role on there. And then there's an online application form that you would have to fill out. If you are interested in finding out more information as well, we do hold information nights regularly in Sydney, Melbourne, Perth, New Zealand at the moment. So the dates are online and you can register to attend them. But yeah, so go to our website, and obviously we're happy to answer any questions that might come up along the way, and there's lots to learn from there as well. So
So it's a join our team part of it.
yeah, join our team.
Yeah.
Big letters at the top. So, but yeah, so I think that's all we've got time for this evening, though. So thank you, Kerry and Nick, for both coming
Thank
in.
you.
Hopefully, for everyone joining, you'll be able to get a little bit more information around the finance and HR roles. It's a big topic and things that we can talk about for a long time, I think, and lots of stories to share. But we'll finish it there. So thanks for joining us, and have a good evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.